When I observe the intricate dance between men and women, I am continually struck by one of the most profound paradoxes of human nature, the magnetic pull that emerges when distance appears between lovers. Today, I wish to explore with you why it is that men often fall deeper in love precisely when a woman begins to pull away. In my decades of exploring the human psyche, I have witnessed this phenomenon countless times in my practice. And I believe it reveals something fundamental about the architecture of masculine desire and the very nature of love itself. This is not merely about psychology. This touches the deepest wellsprings of what it means to be human. You see, there exists within every man what I have come to understand as the eternal hunter. This is not the crude stereotype that modern discourse would have you believe, but rather an archetypal force that has shaped masculine consciousness for millennia. The hunter does not pursue what is already captured. He is drawn to what remains elusive, mysterious, and just beyond his grasp. When a woman is fully present, fully available, fully surrendered to a man's attention, something curious happens in the depths of his unconscious mind. The hunt, as it were, appears to be over. The prize has been won. And while his conscious mind may tell him this is exactly what he wanted, his deeper psyche, that ancient instinctual part of him that has been forged by millions of years of evolutionary pressure, begins to grow restless. But when she begins to pull away, when her attention turns elsewhere, when her presence becomes less certain, something awakens in him that may have been slumbering. Suddenly the game is alive again. Suddenly there is something to pursue, something to win, something to prove worthy of. The very withdrawal that his conscious mind fears becomes the catalyst for a deeper, more passionate engagement. This is not manipulation, though it can certainly be used as such by those who understand its power without wisdom. Rather, it is the natural rhythm of attraction and desire, as old as humanity itself. It speaks to what I call the principle of opposition, that consciousness itself emerges from the tension between polarities, and that love, at its deepest level, thrives on this same dynamic tension. Consider the nature of value itself. We do not prize what comes too easily, what requires no effort, what poses no challenge to our growth. A man may enjoy such things temporarily, but they do not capture his soul. His soul is captured by that which calls forth his highest potential, his greatest effort, his most noble qualities. And this calling forth happens not when everything is certain and secure, but when something precious is at risk of being lost. When a woman pulls away, she is unconsciously activating what I call the man's heroic impulse. Every man carries within him the archetype of the hero, the one who overcomes obstacles, who proves worthy of the treasure, who transforms himself in the crucible of challenge. This is not about dominance or possession, but about becoming. A man in love with a woman who challenges him is really a man falling in love with who he becomes in the process of winning her. I have observed that men often mistake the feeling of certainty for the feeling of love. When a woman is completely predictable, completely available, completely within his control, he may feel comfortable, he may feel secure, but he is unlikely to feel that electric aliveness that true passion requires. Passion requires uncertainty, it requires risk, it requires the possibility of loss, because only in that possibility does something become truly precious to us. This is why the woman who maintains her own center, her own life, her own mysterious depths, remains forever fascinating to a man. She is not playing games, she is simply being whole. She is not manipulating his emotions, she is honoring her own complexity. And in doing so, she gives him the gift of pursuit, the gift of uncertainty, the gift of having to rise to meet her. There is another layer to this phenomenon that reaches deep into what I call the collective unconscious. For thousands of years, men have been shaped by the experience of having to prove themselves worthy of love. This is embedded in our myths, our stories, our deepest psychological patterns. The knight who must rescue the princess, the suitor who must win the hand of his beloved, the hero who must complete impossible tasks. These are not merely stories, they are blueprints of masculine psychology. When a woman is too easily won, it violates this ancient pattern. Something in the man's psyche rebels against it, not because he is cruel or selfish, but because it feels incomplete, unearned, somehow inauthentic. He has not been required to transform himself, to prove his worth, to demonstrate his commitment through action rather than mere words. But when she pulls away, when she becomes uncertain, when winning her requires him to examine himself, to grow, to change, to become more than he was, then he encounters what I call the authentic challenge of love. This is not the artificial challenge of games and manipulation, but the real challenge of becoming worthy of something truly valuable. I must emphasize that this is not about women needing to be cold or distant or cruel. Rather, it is about the importance of maintaining what I call psychological differentiation. A woman who completely loses herself in a relationship, who has no life apart from her man, who defines herself entirely through his attention and approval, has actually made herself less valuable, not more valuable. She has collapsed the very tension that keeps love alive. The woman who pulls away is often the woman who has remembered herself. She has remembered her own dreams, her own purposes, her own connection to something greater than the relationship. And paradoxically, this makes her more attractive, not less. The man suddenly sees her not as an extension of himself, but as a separate, autonomous being with her own mysterious depths and purposes. This touches on what I call the anima, the feminine principle within every man's psyche. When a woman is completely merged with him, completely available, she can no longer serve as a bridge to his own inner feminine. She becomes too familiar, too known. But when she maintains her separateness, her mystery, her own relationship to the depths, she continues to activate his anima, continues to put him in touch with the mysterious feminine principle that he both craves and needs for his own psychological wholeness. I have observed that men often become more romantic, more attentive, more creative in their expressions of love when faced with the possibility of loss. This is not merely desperation, though it can be that in its shadow form. At its best, it is the awakening of appreciation. We take for granted what is always there, what never changes, what poses no challenge to our consciousness. But when something precious might slip away, suddenly we see it clearly. Suddenly we value it properly. Suddenly we are moved to action. The woman who pulls away is teaching the man the art of appreciation. She is requiring him to see her clearly, to value her properly, to treat her as the precious being she is, rather than as a fixture in his life. This is a profound gift, though it may not feel like one to either party in the moment. There is also the matter of what I call psychological projection. When a man is with a woman who is completely available, completely predictable, he often begins to project his own shadow onto the relationship. He becomes bored, restless, critical. He begins to take out his own internal conflicts on the very person who is trying to love him most completely. But when she pulls away, when she becomes less available, he is forced to confront these projections. He can no longer blame the relationship for his restlessness. He must look within himself. He can no longer take her for granted. He must examine what she actually means to him. This process, though uncomfortable, is essential for genuine love to develop. I want to speak to something else I have observed, the difference between attachment and love. Many men mistake their attachment, their need, their dependence, their habit, for love. When a woman is constantly available, constantly reassuring, constantly present, she often enables this confusion. The man feels attached, he feels comfortable, he feels secure, but he may not be experiencing genuine love. Genuine love requires seeing the other as separate, as autonomous, as having their own valid existence apart from you. It requires appreciating them not for what they do for you, but for who they are in themselves. When a woman pulls away, she forces this recognition. The man must confront whether he loves her or merely depends on her. This confrontation, though painful, is necessary for mature love to emerge. I have also noticed that men often unconsciously test women by becoming complacent, by taking them for granted, by reducing their effort in the relationship. This is not necessarily conscious cruelty. It is often an unconscious way of discovering whether the woman has any standards, any self-respect, any boundaries. A woman who accepts everything, who demands nothing, who has no limits, actually fails this unconscious test. When she pulls away, when she shows that she will not accept being taken for granted, she passes this test. She demonstrates that she values herself, that she has standards, that she is not desperate or needy. And paradoxically, this makes her more valuable in his eyes, not less. Men are attracted to strength, not weakness, though they may temporarily take advantage of weakness if it is offered. This relates to what I understand about the masculine psyche's relationship to challenge. A man's sense of worth, his sense of aliveness, his sense of purpose, is often tied to his ability to overcome obstacles and achieve difficult goals. A woman who presents no challenge, who requires no effort, who can be won without any growth or transformation on his part, actually deprives him of the opportunity to feel worthy of her. When she pulls away, she restores this opportunity. Suddenly there is something to strive for, something to earn, something to prove himself worthy of. This awakens what is best in him, his determination, his creativity, his willingness to grow and change. In rising to meet this challenge, he often discovers capacities within himself that he didn't know he possessed. But I must add an important caveat here. This dynamic works only when the woman's pulling away is authentic, when it comes from her own center, her own needs, her own integrity. If it is merely a strategy, merely a manipulation designed to control his behavior, it will ultimately backfire. Men can sense authenticity at a deep level, and they are drawn to it. They can also sense manipulation, and while they may respond to it temporarily, it will eventually poison the relationship. The woman who pulls away authentically is not trying to hurt or control the man. She is simply honoring her own needs, her own growth, her own connection to something greater than the relationship. She may be pursuing her own dreams, dealing with her own challenges, or simply needing space to reconnect with herself. This authentic pulling away is very different from the calculated withdrawal designed to create jealousy or insecurity. I want to explore another dimension of this phenomenon, the role of mystery in love. One of the greatest gifts a woman can give to a man is the gift of her mystery. Not the artificial mystery of withholding information or playing games, but the natural mystery of being a complex, evolving, growing human being with depths that cannot be fully known or possessed. When a woman is always available, always predictable, always the same, she loses this mystery. The man begins to feel that he knows everything about her, that there are no more discoveries to be made, no more depths to explore. Love thrives on discovery, on the sense that there is always more to know, more to understand, more to appreciate about the beloved. The woman who pulls away often restores this mystery. Suddenly the man realizes there are parts of her life he doesn't know about, aspects of her personality he hasn't seen, depths of her being he hasn't explored. This realization can be profoundly exciting and attractive. It reminds him that she is not his possession, not his creation, but a separate and fascinating being worthy of continued exploration. This connects to what I understand about the nature of desire itself. Desire is always reaching toward what it does not yet fully possess. When something is completely possessed, completely known, completely controlled, desire naturally diminishes. This is not a flaw in human nature. It is simply the way desire works. It is the engine that drives growth, exploration, and evolution. The wise woman understands this and maintains what I call creative distance. Not the distance of coldness or rejection, but the distance of autonomy and self-respect. She gives fully of herself when she is present, but she also maintains her own life, her own interests, her own relationship with the sacred. This creates the space necessary for desire to breathe and grow. I have observed that relationships often die not from conflict or incompatibility, but from a kind of suffocation, from the complete merging of two people into one undifferentiated mass. When this happens, the very polarity that creates attraction is lost. There is no longer a dance between two separate beings, but rather a static unity that, while comfortable, lacks the electricity of true passion. The woman who periodically pulls away prevents this suffocation. She maintains the necessary separateness that keeps the relationship alive and growing. She refuses to be absorbed completely into the man's world, and in doing so, she preserves the very thing that makes her attractive to him. This is particularly important because of what I understand about masculine psychology. Men are often unconsciously attracted to that which they cannot fully control or possess. This is not about dominance games or power struggles, but about the deep truth that we are most fully alive when we are engaged with forces and beings that challenge us to grow and expand. A woman who can be completely controlled, completely predicted, completely possessed, actually becomes less interesting to the masculine psyche over time. Not because men are shallow or cruel, but because the masculine spirit is naturally drawn to that which calls forth its highest potential. And this calling forth requires resistance, challenge, and the possibility of failure. When a woman pulls away, she provides this necessary resistance. She forces the man to examine his commitment, to clarify his priorities, to decide what he is willing to sacrifice or change to keep her in his life. This process, though uncomfortable, is essential for deep love to develop and mature. I want to address something I have noticed about the timing of these withdrawals. Often a woman pulls away precisely when the relationship is becoming more serious, more committed, more real. This is not coincidence. It is often an unconscious wisdom. At the moment when a man might be tempted to become complacent, to take the relationship for granted, to stop growing and striving, she creates a situation that prevents this stagnation. Her withdrawal at these crucial moments serves as a kind of evolutionary pressure on the relationship. It forces both parties to examine whether they are truly choosing each other or merely falling into habit. It requires conscious commitment rather than unconscious drift. It calls forth the highest in both people rather than allowing them to settle for the merely comfortable. This process can be painful for both parties, but it is often necessary for the relationship to reach its full potential. Without this kind of challenge, many relationships remain at a superficial level, comfortable but not transformative, pleasant but not passionate, secure but not growth-inducing. I must also speak to the shadow side of this dynamic. When it is conscious and intentional, when it becomes a pattern of manipulation rather than authentic response, it can become destructive. Some women learn to use withdrawal as a weapon, as a way of controlling and punishing men. This perverts the natural dynamic into something toxic and harmful. Similarly, some men become addicted to this dynamic, unable to love a woman who is consistently present and available. They mistake the anxiety and uncertainty of pursuit for the genuine feeling of love. They become what we might call pursuit addicts, always needing the drama and challenge of winning someone who is pulling away. The healthy version of this dynamic is quite different. It occurs naturally when two people maintain their individual autonomy and growth while building a relationship together. It is not a game or a strategy, but the natural result of two whole people choosing to share their lives while remaining true to themselves. In my work, I have seen that the most lasting and passionate relationships are those where both parties maintain what I call creative tension. They are fully committed to each other, but they are also committed to their own growth, their own purposes, their own relationship with the divine or the sacred. This creates a natural rhythm of coming together and moving apart, of intimacy and autonomy, of merger and separation. This rhythm is not a problem to be solved, but a dance to be embraced. It is what keeps love alive and growing throughout the many seasons of a long relationship. Without it, relationships tend to become static, boring, and ultimately unsatisfying to both parties. The woman who understands this rhythm and honors it, who gives fully when she is present but also maintains her own center, her own growth, her own mysterious depths, becomes truly irresistible to a man capable of mature love. She calls forth his highest potential without sacrificing her own. I want to return to something fundamental about masculine psychology that I believe explains this phenomenon at its deepest level. Within every man lives what I call the eternal question, am I worthy? This question is not about ego or vanity. It is about the deepest concerns of the masculine soul. Am I strong enough, wise enough, good enough to protect and provide for what is precious? Am I worthy of love, of trust, of partnership with the sacred feminine? When a woman is completely available, completely accepting, completely non-demanding, she inadvertently deprives the man of opportunities to answer this question affirmatively. He cannot prove his worth to someone who requires no proof. He cannot demonstrate his love to someone who asks for no demonstration. He cannot grow into his full potential for someone who accepts him exactly as he is, without any expectation of growth or change. But when she pulls away, when her availability becomes uncertain, when her standards become apparent, she creates the space for him to answer this eternal question. He must ask himself, what am I willing to do to keep this woman in my life? How much am I willing to grow, to change, to sacrifice for love? What is she worth to me? And what am I worth to her? These questions, though challenging, are precisely what the masculine soul needs to encounter to feel fully alive and engaged. They provide the resistance against which his character can be forged, his commitment can be tested, his love can be proven genuine, rather than merely convenient. This is why men often become most romantic, most attentive, most creative in their expressions of love when faced with the possibility of loss. It is not manipulation working on them, it is truth working on them. The truth that love is precious, that it must be earned and maintained, that it requires the best of who we are, rather than the comfortable minimum we might otherwise offer. I have observed that women often misunderstand this dynamic. They may interpret a man's increased attention and effort during times of uncertainty as evidence that he only wants what he cannot have, that he is shallow or game-playing. But often quite the opposite is true. These moments of potential loss are when he most clearly sees her value, most deeply feels his love, most urgently wants to express and demonstrate what she means to him. The tragedy is that many women, not understanding this, interpret his stepping up during these times as too little, too late. They may have already decided that his previous complacency meant he didn't really love them. But I would suggest that both his complacency and his renewed effort are natural human responses to the presence and absence of challenge in love. This brings me to what I believe is the deeper truth underlying this phenomenon. Love is not a static feeling, but a dynamic force. Like all living things, it requires certain conditions to thrive. It needs novelty, challenge, growth, and change. It needs the space to miss and be missed, to choose and be chosen, to lose and find again. The woman who is always present, always available, always the same, inadvertently creates conditions where love has no room to grow or express itself dynamically. She means well, she wants to love and be loved completely, but she may unknowingly be starving the very love she is trying to nurture. The woman who maintains her own life, her own growth, her own mystery, who sometimes pulls away to tend to her own needs and purposes, creates the space and challenge that love requires to stay alive and passionate. She is not being cruel or withholding. She is being wise about the nature of love itself. This wisdom is ancient and can be found in the great love stories throughout history. The beloved who remains somewhat elusive, somewhat mysterious, somewhat challenging, continues to inspire great passion and devotion across years and decades. The beloved who becomes completely transparent and available, no matter how wonderful they may be as a person, often finds that passion fades into comfortable companionship. There is nothing wrong with comfortable companionship. It has its place and value. But if passion is desired, if the electricity of romantic love is to be maintained throughout a long relationship, then the dynamic of approach and withdrawal, of presence and absence, of certainty and mystery, must be honored and maintained. I want to speak to something else I have observed about this dynamic: the role of idealization in masculine love. Men often fall in love not just with who a woman is, but with who she represents to them, what she symbolizes, how she connects them to something greater than themselves. This idealization is not a flaw, but a feature of masculine psychology. It is part of how men connect to the sacred, to beauty, to meaning. When a woman is completely available and predictable, this idealization naturally diminishes. She becomes too familiar, too ordinary, too much a part of his everyday reality to maintain her symbolic power in his psyche. But when she pulls away, when she becomes less certain, she can once again be idealized, can once again represent something precious and worthy of devotion. This is not about putting women on pedestals in an unhealthy way, but about maintaining the sense of wonder and reverence that keeps love alive. The man who sees his woman as ordinary, as completely known, as fully possessed, has lost something essential about love itself. The man who continues to see her as somewhat mysterious, somewhat precious, somewhat beyond his complete understanding, maintains the capacity for true devotion. The woman who pulls away often restores this capacity for wonder and reverence. She reminds the man that she is not merely a familiar object in his life, but a mysterious and precious being worthy of his highest attention and effort. This reminder can be transformative for both the man and the relationship. I must emphasize again that this pulling away must be authentic to be truly effective. It must come from the woman's own center, her own needs, her own integrity. If it is merely a technique learned from some manual on relationships, it will lack the authenticity that makes it truly attractive. Men can sense the difference between genuine autonomy and manipulative withdrawal, and they respond very differently to each. The woman who authentically pulls away is not trying to hurt or control the man. She is simply honoring her own wholeness, her own growth, her own needs. She may need time alone, time with friends, time to pursue her own interests and dreams. She may need to process her own emotions, to reconnect with her own center, to remember who she is apart from the relationship. This authentic withdrawal serves both herself and the relationship. It prevents her from losing herself in the merger of romantic love, and it prevents the relationship from becoming stagnant. It maintains what I call the creative tension that keeps love alive and growing. There is another aspect of this phenomenon that relates to what I understand about the cycles of intimacy. All relationships naturally cycle between periods of closeness and distance, of merger and separation, of intensity and calm. This is not a problem, but a natural rhythm that must be honored if relationships are to remain healthy and vital. Many people, both men and women, misunderstand these cycles. When their partner needs distance, they interpret it as rejection or loss of love. When their partner seeks closeness, they may feel suffocated or overwhelmed. But these cycles are natural and necessary. They allow for the processing of intimacy, the maintenance of individual identity, and the renewal of desire.